The Intercollegiate
Psychedelics Network.
Hello, everyone. I'm Mitsu. I have a master's in clinical psychology from Teachers College, Columbia University. And today I will be speaking with you about the coloniality of knowledge systems, the potential of allying with psychedelics as a means to disassemble colonial ways of thinking and being, and the role of the imagination in rethinking our collective futures. We'll start off with an exercise of the imagination. Here's Roshni having a full-blown psychedelic experience. She grew up in a household where children, girls in particular, were meant to be seen and not heard. She had arrived into the experience believing that the fundamental nature of reality was material. So when she connected with the power and pain of a maternal ancestor during her experience, she didn't know what to make of it. She was convinced that she had gained unmediated knowledge about a distant female ancestor who was a leader and warrior in her matriarchal community. Roshni is grappling with the juxtaposition of the epistemic and ontological underpinnings of her current life experience and that of her maternal ancestors. What is she to do in this state of instability? So you may have heard of the concept of set and setting. A distinctive feature of psychedelic drugs is the wide range of potential subjective effects that they can elicit. Set refers to one's internal state, such as their thoughts, their mood, their expectations. And setting refers to the physical and social environment in which one has the psychedelic experience. Roshni had been preparing for her psychedelic journey for some time now. She had reflected on her intentions, any expectations she may be carrying into the experience. Her setting was in the presence and safety of a medicine worker she had a close relationship with. She was feeling pretty optimistic going into the experience. What she hadn't accounted for was insight into larger and perhaps oppressive systems of knowledge that would destabilize her metaphysical beliefs. Her setting really wasn't as simple as the room she had the experience in. Another aspect of psychedelics is the potential of shaping a variety of ethical and political perspectives, from ideologies such as neo-animism, alt-right ideologies, to decoloniality. Personal anecdotes, and more recently, a study conducted by Timmerman and colleagues demonstrated that psychedelic experiences can result in ontological shock, the state of being forced to question one's worldview that can mediate shifts in perspective, including shifts in metaphysical beliefs. Based on Roshni's experience, and evidence that suggests that psychedelic experiences can reshape ontological perspectives, I would like to pose the following 3 questions. 1, what role, if any, does allying with psychedelics play in the process of decolonization? 2, is the process of decolonization a synthesis of colonial and decolonial cognitive systems and the imaginative unknown? And 3, Does the ontological and epistemic instability following psychedelic experiences for some make them vulnerable to becoming agents of reinforcing dominant philosophical structures? Or does it make room for novel ways of being and knowing? To start off, let's spend some time exploring the coloniality of knowledge. The coloniality of power, a concept developed by Aníbal Quijano, a Peruvian sociologist, humanist, and decolonial thinker, refers to structures of power, control, and hegemony that emerged during colonial rule and continue to influence the ways in which we define knowledge production, culture, and how we relate to one another and ourselves today. An example of the coloniality of power and the hegemony of knowledge systems we see in the psychedelic renaissance today is perhaps the erasure of ayahuasca as a piece of technology developed by the Amazonian people. It is through a deep relationship and understanding of their environment that the people of the Amazon were able to arrive at such ethnobotanical knowledge. One can argue that the development of an ayahuasca pill, for example, is an instance of indigenous epistemicide, which is the silencing and devaluing of a knowledge system. How then can psychedelics, or more explicitly, psychedelic experiences, serve as an aid for the decolonial project? In his 2021 papers, Falcon refers to Kratochvíl's book, Philosophy of Living Nature, in which he discusses how nature tends to be described from one particular perspective. It is effectively devoid of its temporal and informal associations and interrelations. This process, too, can be seen as a form of epistemicide. Falcon argues that psychedelic states of consciousness can act as decolonial tools and anarchic agents. They can mediate an assessment of historical and current social and environmental relations. They can serve as allies with which concretized patterns of thought can be addressed and reflected upon. Can create opportunities to reflect on ontologies and epistemologies that perhaps have become concretized due to routinizations or for various other reasons. It's important to look at another aspect of psychedelic experiences: the influence of the ontology and epistemology of the particular container within which one has the psychedelic experience. In his article for Chacruna, Institute for Psychedelic Plant Medicines, Romero explores the roots of Mazatec shamanic knowledge dating back to the Mesoamerican tradition and the synthesis of symbols and elements from other religious traditions. One can assume that Spanish colonization contributed to the integration of Christian elements into Mazatec shamanic cosmologies. A recent example of the synthesis of knowledge systems is found in David Dupuy's 2022 paper, The Socialization of Hallucinations. Dupuy argues that cultural background and social interactions not only influence the hallucinogenic experience, but also its very phenomenological content. His ethnographic fieldwork was conducted in Taquihuasi, which is a shamanic center in the high Amazon region of Peru. The center combines rituals and elements from the region's indigenous and Métis shamanism, Catholicism, and New Age spirituality. So we can already see here an integration of these different knowledge systems. Prior to the ayahuasca journey, participants were asked to prepare for their encounter with the spiritual world, marked by Catholic entities and icons. After the experience, many of the participants reported having visions of demons, the Virgin Mary, and other Catholic entities. Dupuy proposes that the hallucinogenic experiences themselves were influenced by the ontological theories offered by the Takiwasi. Through a communal experience, the hallucinogenic experience could be deemed as a vector for cultural transmission and affiliation to the social group in which people had the psychedelic experience. So where does this leave us? As is the case for Roshni, our case study participant who has been navigating this in our imaginations, a person having a psychedelic experience enters a liminal space in which previous cognitive structures may be suspended. Depending on the phenomenology of the experience, these previously held frameworks, such as colonial systems of thought, may be destabilized. I return back to one of my initial research questions. Does the ontological and epistemic instability following psychedelic experiences for some make them vulnerable to becoming agents of reinforcing dominant philosophical structures, or make room for novel ways of being and knowing? This state of suspension can perhaps urge one to fill in gaps of knowledge with ideology, to make meaning, create narratives that may help ground the instability one experiences after a particularly destabilizing psychedelic experience. This then raises questions of ethics of such altered states of consciousness. In what ways are we filling these gaps in knowledge? Which ideologies are we grasping at after a psychedelic experience, especially one that was particularly destabilizing? Another marker of psychedelic experiences is grappling with the unknown. Imagination allows us to reframe our understanding of history and challenge dominant narratives that uphold oppressive legacies. Imagination allows us to envision new futures. And while psychedelics can generate liminal spaces to have such visions, they warrant close examination of which code of ethics we are reifying in this process. Thank you so much for listening. Here are my references. Thanks so much.